let's talk about the music now. The song of Serakh, I see it says it's a nigun for Pesach. Now, does that mean that it would fit into the Seder?
That was one of the ideas. I was originally inspired by the character, and I learned about the character from the book dedicated to Pesach by David Arnov called Creating Livelier Passover Seders. And it was just a book chock full of stories, activities, ideas to how to make the Seders more interesting and like do it yourself kind of a thing. Try it at home. And one of them was the story of Serakh, this fascinating character who is actually mentioned in the Torah by name, but that's it. We just get the name. But there's a lot of midrashim that sort of fill in the gaps, the white fire around the black fire, that fill in the gaps and tell the story of Serakh, what her talents were, and specifically that she was a remarkable musician. And, you know, as far as I know, she is like the first and possibly the only music therapist in the Bible that knows how to talk to people and how to have difficult conversation and how to hold space in them. So that's one of her many talents.
Well, there is David playing the harp for Saul.
That's generations later, though.
Right.
And he's not a woman.
Right. First of all, she's a girl, right?
He was practicing music therapy without a license, perhaps.
Interesting. I'm gonna just leave it there. So
is it a lyre or is it a harp or is it something that resembles?
So in the midrash, they just talk about string instruments, and of course we you know the equivalency is, you know, it's a whole other research and a whole other conversation. But the interesting thing is that it is her interaction with Jacob that, as described in the story that then I put to music and you guys so beautifully presented, was what, according to Midrash, gave her either very long life or possibly caused her to be taken to Gan Eden, to paradise alive, along with Elijah and some other illustrious folks. And then from there on, she had also the ability to frequently interfere in the running of Jewish history and directed in God-given way, to creating things that needed to happen. So according to some Midrashim, she really appears in the key moments. She identifies to the Israelites Moses as the one chosen by God because he's using a key phrase, Pakod Yifkad, God will remember you. She, earlier on, she knows the spot where Joseph's bones are buried. And when they're leaving Egypt, she tells them where to find them. She even, talking about, knowing better than some of the licensed folks, she interferes in the conversation in Beit Midrash later on, when they're talking about how was it leaving Egypt? And as we walked through the sea, what was it like, that the water, and the Torah, the quote says, Miminamo mismolam, like the wall to the right and to the left. And Serakh barges into their classroom and she says, actually, it was more like transparent windows. And then she exits. Love it, what a character. And then apparently she was also in David's court too, giving him some pointers. So, what I mean?
Well, the Red Sea is often translated as the Sea of Reeds. So the windows could be through those reeds, not just.
We can talk to Serakh about it. I'm sure she's still around.
I'm here. I'm still here.
So Natasha,
it's just like a woman to interfere and interrupt the conversation and to make things much clearer. Good girl.
So now tell us about when you wrote the music and what you had in mind for it and how it's been performed.
Once you read a story as a composer that has music as a key element, it's really hard not to hear an equivalence in your mind. So I heard this, and in my mind, it was so interesting to hear your interpretation, because in my mind, it was something much more like knowingly chronologically incorrect. It was like a romantic 19th century Chopin. That's what I was hearing. But I didn't transcribe it like this. I really just wrote the melody line and some ideas and the narrative. And I left it intentionally open because I didn't know if it would be done a cappella as part of the Seder, just telling the story and just really quoting the words, and that would be it. Or it would be part of a larger performance I've done. It was my community chorus in Brooklyn where we harmonized and we did the round like you guys are doing. So
you did harmonize it spontaneously, or did you write out the harmony?
No, I mean, I think I wrote the chorus. I don't remember anymore. But since I was playing the piano, that's a problem. When you play the piano, you don't need to write a lot. And then only when somebody else takes over, and then you're like, oh, I should have written some more. So anyway, I think
there's a lot of music that Mark Blitzstein performed that he didn't write out completely because he was performing it at the piano, and now they say that it's unfinished. I mean, I've been going through it and finishing it, writing the accompaniments. So your piece really doesn't have a written accompaniment except what we provided and what you provided extemporaneously, essentially. Is that correct?
Right. So that's so one of these days, maybe I'll write it out. And but part of it was that I like the idea of giving people a tool to adapt according to their vision, to their understanding. And since then, I've heard other musical interpretations of it. I have a former student, now a wonderful colleague, who is now a cantor at the Kane Street Synagogue, Sarah Meyerson, and she wrote a very different musical style interpretation of this. And there's no, she doesn't put in the story; she just sets the words. And I think that's the beauty of it, that that people feel inspired to hear what they hear. And
can you describe how her interpretation differed from yours and ours?
Her interpretation sounds more like, I would say, a folk song. It is very simple, chorded very simple. Like almost like a drawn, a major chord, and she goes Moshe Yosef Mitzrayim, and there's a drawn, and it's like the melody barely moves. But you could imagine also this kind of a chant meditative space that Serakh is creating as she conveys the message. It's just a very different image, a very different musical language, and also I feel a very powerful interpretation. So this is great.
What about the accompanying instruments? When you did it with piano. When we did it with piano and viola, emulating the harp or the lyre with.
Well, I only heard the recording. She might be using. I would have to ask her. I think she's knowing that she has access to accordion. So I think the harmonium sound is a sustained sound of the accordion, which is piano is not able to do, and. There may be other elements there layered as well. I don't recall right now the details, but we can, someday. Maybe you'll
post it so we can compare. That's great. And the last question is, we talked about how this is Nigun for Pesach, and I said it might be in the Seder. Where would it fit in the Seder?
The most forgiving section there are all these steps, right? And that's why it's called the Seder. But the most forgiving section, of course, is the Magid, the telling of the story. And I think, the traditional Haggadah doesn't actually tell the story of Exodus. It quotes different stories of the rabbis and their interpretation. Some people go straight for more of a retelling of the story. This is what happened first. This is what happened next. And one could imagine that one of the ways to enliven a Passover Seder would be to share compelling characters that were part of the story. And especially Serakh, not only she's a compelling character because of the role she plays in that first story, but because she keeps reappearing in the story of Exodus at the key moments, and because there's there's some women in the story of Exodus, but could always be more. And because it is, I could imagine every family gathering probably carries in it a lot of joy and excitement, and maybe some difficult moments, right? Like some, like the famous cartoon from New Yorker about the Thanksgiving table that shows 12 people sitting around, and there's a vegetarian, gluten-free. This is like the 12 options of what people like, and I'm sure everybody feels like their diet is the only correct one, and everybody else is like. So I could also imagine that what it's like to have a difficult conversation with members of the family and bring harmony to the world. So there's so many inspirational moments for me from what Serakh brings, connecting to history, connecting to our identity, and also moving forward. So that was the inspiration, and thank you for picking it up and bringing your own interpretation to it.
Well, that's certainly inspiring to all of us, and we really appreciate your participating in this concert with us.